Montevideo, donde estamos aquí presencialmente para lanzar el informe GEM 2023 sobre tecnología en la educación. Les decía también buenas tardes porque esto se está transmitiendo en todo el mundo a través de diferentes canales. Es una transmisión en vivo que pueden seguir por los canales de la UNESCO, del informe GEM, de la Fundación Ceibal, del Ministerio de Educación y Cultura de Uruguay, tanto en español como en inglés. Así que muy bienvenidos a lo que será una jornada.
Please be welcome to a very fruitful and reflection workshop. The idea is to be open for dialogue, to understand everything that we have learned throughout this GEM report. We would invite you to join our communication using the hashtags 2023 GEM report, GEM Report 2023. You can also share your pictures, reflections, or a video if you like. And this would be like a feedback process for us to continue discussing. It is a true proud for Uruguay and Montevideo to be hosting this launch and to be part of a kickoff. Officially, I will invite Maria Florencia Ripani. She's the director of Foundation Ceibal, and she's going to be moderating this first part of a day. Please be welcome. Thank you so much. Welcome everybody to this global GEM 2023 report on follow-up of education worldwide on technology in education, published by UNESCO and titled A Tool under the GEM tools. The objective is to monitor the progress made in relation to the SDGs, in particular for goal number 4, related to education. It is the first time since we started running these reports and publishing these reports. This is the first time that we are talking about technology on education. So we are so happy to be here and to be able to start this activity for which we are host from Ceibal Foundation and also with the Ministry of Education and Culture in Uruguay. This event is jointly organized along with the GEM UNESCO report team. On behalf of the organizers, I would like to welcome national authorities, international authorities, ambassadors, and representatives from international agencies and organizations and experts and people from the academia. Many of you have traveled specially to Montevideo to be part of this key event in the educational calendar. We would also like to welcome those who are joining us from different parts of the world through the online transmission. In order to formally start our presentation, we would like to invite the Ministry of Education and Culture of Uruguay, but first, before we hear him, we will listen to a recorded message from the General UNESCO Director, Audrey Osolet.
Excelencias, señoras y señores.
Ladies and gentlemen, Your Excellence, the COVID pandemic was, without a shade of a doubt, the best illustration of what technology can and can do in favor of education. This was also a lesson learned about thinking that technology is always good and always a sign of progress. 2023 edition of this report on follow-up on education on the world places this work in perspective. We would like to thank Uruguay for leading the path in this field through the National Plan of Digital Education, Ceibal Plan, and also for welcoming us our debates.
What can we learn from this report, which focuses on technology in education? Maybe that there are at least 4 paradoxical trends in this field. 4 lessons that we can learn from past experience. The first lesson we can learn is that we must never forget the social and emotional dimensions of teaching and learning. While technology does have the potential to personalize learning, no screen will ever replace a teacher. Learning means listening, trusting, creating connections. Everything else is a tool, and tools can be useful and effective, but they can do nothing without the fundamental relationship between teacher and student. The second lesson is one of perspective, because these tools may enhance the learning experience for some, but they are out of reach for millions of people around the world. There cannot be a universal solution when only 40% of primary schools worldwide are connected to the internet, or when 70% of rural populations in sub-Saharan Africa do not even have electricity. And this brings me to the third lesson, the deep disconnect between the desire to make education a global public good and the proliferation of private technology providers in this field, which raises the question of their commercial interest. This report raises the alarm. For instance, only 14% of countries guarantee data privacy in education by law. It's a major risk that must be addressed. Finally, the fourth lesson of this report is a warning. In introducing digital solutions in education, we must always ask ourselves whether it really serves the long-term educational outcomes of children. We must bear in mind that learning requires concentration, focus, which can be disrupted by digital devices. And we must be aware that increased screen time can have an impact on children's physical and mental health. This is why we need to find a better balance in our use of digital solutions while avoiding unnecessary exposure. We now have evidence of the negative impact of smartphones on learning, yet fewer than a quarter of countries ban them from schools. Señoras y señores, estos desafíos pueden superarse y por eso nuestro informe ofrece recomendaciones. Nos invita a abordar el uso de la tecnología en la educación en nuestros propios términos. En los próximos días, los animo a que tomen como base nuestras recomendaciones, teniendo siempre presente que la tecnología debe estar al servicio de la educación sin gobernarla. Muchas gracias. Merci à vous.
Luego de este importante mensaje de la directora general de UNESCO, ahora sí invitamos al ministro de Educación y Cultura de Uruguay, Pablo da Silveira, a dar unas palabras de apertura.
We would like to invite Pablo da Silveira for some opening words.
Muy buenos días para todos y en primer lugar,
good morning, everybody, and first of all, please be welcome everyone who is attending this meeting and coming to Montevideo for this presentation. Ministries of Education, technicians, members from the academia, and also members from international organizations. Please, I would like you to feel at home here in our city. It is the first time that this prestigious international report and global report is presented in Latin America. This is a true privilege, and we are very excited as Uruguayans for having this activity here in Montevideo. I would like to thank UNESCO, and especially the Education Directorate from UNESCO, managed from our dear Stefana, that is going to be here with us after some problems with her flights. She will be coming today, and I will also like to thank our office of UNESCO in Uruguay. They are a great ally of the Ministry of Education in Uruguay, and they are constantly working together with us in all projects regarding in and out of education, like other things like science, culture, and technology. And I would also like to thank Ceibal Foundation. They have been a true pillar in the organization of this activity. There is an old saying that was generated in other contexts within the context of the 1970s, but is still current in many areas today. That is, if you think globally, think globally but act locally. And I think that this is very applicable when it comes to start a reflection on this report. We're all subject to global trends, in this case that have to do with the evolution of technology and the impact that new technologies are having on our daily lives as societies and in education. But we also see within our personal contexts, our histories behind us as societies and our educational history. We have, of course, our own specific challenges and our specific opportunities. So this is why a meeting as today's, we are not waiting for formulations or recipes to be applicable elsewhere. This is an environment in which we're going to be exchanging ideas, exchanging evidence, and it is an opportunity of enriching ourselves with the lessons learned and the opinions from other colleagues. Also, to learn from the developments of others. And once we are back home, or for us who are going to be staying, it will be up to us as a challenge to find out and to see whether these opportunities and these challenges can be overcome in order to make better decisions, in order to develop better social policies in each one of our countries. So I would like to invite you all not to forget that an event as this, it is not an end, but it is the way, the path to improve the quality of our policies and the quality of our decisions. The idea is to build the best education we can possibly build in order to provide this for our nation, our students, and our employees. Thank you so much. We would like to thank the Ministry of Education and Culture of Uruguay for his opening words, and I would like to highlight the relevance of this event. As the Minister said, it is the first time that a GEM report is presented in Latin America, but it is also the first time that it is presented in a Hispanic country. And it is in Uruguay. In this high-level segment, we're going to be having the first presentations of findings and recommendations of the 2023 report on the role of technology on education. This report is based on the current debate that this report is rebuilding.
Las preguntas que propone el informe GEM son las siguientes. ¿La tecnología democratiza el conocimiento o amenaza la democracia al permitir que solo unos pocos controlen la información? ¿Ofrece oportunidades ilimitadas?
Education. Does it offer open or limited opportunities? Does it lead to a future in which we're going to be dependent on technology and we cannot come back? Does this present better opportunities for all of us? Or on the contrary, this will increase differences? And lastly, should we include the capabilities related to the use of technology in education from the early childhood, or is there any risk that this would pose on the development of children? The GEM report gives answers to all these questions within a very particular and challenging context. On the one hand side, the educational systems continue to recover from the devastating effects caused by the pandemic, specifically when we talk about the learning results, despite worldwide efforts to provide remote distance learning. On the other hand, once schools were open again, after the debate on the use of digital systems that are more and more intelligent in education, this report questions who defines the terms of use on technology in education, and it invites the own educational system to answer these questions, always putting the interests of our students in the first place. The presentation of these results and recommendations of the 2023 GEM report on technology and education is going to be presented in this very special auditorium. We have ministries of education from Argentina, Brazil, Ecuador, Honduras, Paraguay, and Uruguay, and over 70 experts and key spokespersons from different parts of the world. We will also have the input, virtual participation from Botswana, Chile, Estonia, Indonesia, Rwanda, Sierra Leone, South Sudan, and Zambia. And in order to present these results, we would like to now give the floor to Manos Antonini. He's the director of this World of Education at UNESCO.
Thank you very much. Honorable ministers, honorable ambassadors, director of the ANEP, president of Ceibal, dear associate minister, minister of Ministry and Culture in Uruguay, director of the Ceibal Foundation. Sirs and madams, it's an honor to present the GEM report 2023. And it's a pleasure to do so for the first time in South America, in Latin America, and for the first time in person in almost 5 years since COVID separated us. I am thankful for you being here, sharing this moment with us. It's been a long trip for many of you, many of us, and we should respect the time that we allot to this and have significant conversations. What we perhaps talk about as significant connections. People are at the center of it. We also gather here to celebrate the commitment of Uruguay of facing a difficult challenge, how to adapt the new gifts of digital technology to the old traditions of education. The GM report, which is independent, published by UNESCO, has been the tool of the international community to monitor the progress towards the international education objectives. Actually, we should remind you that today I'm going to be presenting less than half the content of the report. This actually covers 3 more areas that I invite you to explore. The impact of technologies, of DIC technologies in education, the impact of education in technology, and the progress towards SDG 4. Halfway through the goals of 2030, while we continue to try to evaluate the impact of COVID-19. Perhaps you'll be surprised Sorry, we're having some audio issues. This seems to be what generates most passion and interest. Even though we've tried to talk about other sensitive issues such as migration and inclusion and the role of private stakeholders. Our obligation is to try to take a look at the question from our perspective, which is how to accelerate progress in order to achieve SDG 4, our goal of global education. And this effort, technology, is recognized in the title of the report as a tool, but also we are facing another challenge. The rapid pace of changes. The number of users of the internet has increased 16%, which was 16% in 2005 to 60% in 2022. Just to give you an example, the number of people who participate in massive online courses has increased to 220 million in less than 10 years. And that doesn't include China. But it's also true that education, higher education, has been affected the most. the use of technology is still not as extensive or transformative in other levels of education. Just 1 out of 2 schools of the first cycle of secondary school are connected to the internet, and as this figure shows, using PISA data from 2018, only 1 out of 10 secondary school students of high and mid-level income inform that they use digital devices at least 1 hour per week in science or math classes. The SDG 4 is a complex objective, but let's suppose that we could reduce it to the following, that all young people could come out of secondary school with a minimum level of competence in writing and math. We should recognize that high-income countries who had achieved this did it before the coming of digital technology. This is not a requirement for SDG 4. The technology is just a tool for that. Digital technology is just a tool for that. And so what we should ask ourselves is, what are the education issues that we are trying to solve? Can technology help address these issues? And if so, in what conditions? It might seem strange, but these questions are rarely asked in this order. There's the temptation of asking how we can apply technology in education, even when it's not essential. Those in education change in average every 3 years. And sometimes the pace cannot be followed. Most of evidence comes from a few countries with high income. Meanwhile, not all the impact can be measured easily. Technology is complex, heterogeneous. Despite the lack of evidence, technology is adopted. In the United Kingdom, they discovered that only 7% of the products had been submitted to the most rigorous tests of random control tests. Technology providers are generating most of the evidence. In some cases, we found that this evidence contradicts the findings of independent evaluations.
Allow me to switch now to English. In terms of equity, this region championed the use of radio for remote populations. It also pioneered the use of television, notably in Brazil and Mexico, where the telesecundaria program is credited with having increased enrollment by 1/5. The most transformative impact of technology has been on learners with disabilities. Technology has also supported learners in emergencies, although the report notes with some concern that only just over 10% of interventions were implemented by governments. However, no emergency was as dramatic as in terms of education impact on as was COVID-19, when technology offered a lifeline. But the quality of internet connections and the availability of devices varied a lot. 1/3 of all learners and almost 3 in 4 of the poorest could not connect to distance learning due to the pandemic. In terms of quality, some education technologies can improve some types of learning in some contexts. Technology can vastly increase the range of teaching and learning resources available. It can make lessons more engaging and simplify some types of training. In Ecuador, for instance, Activar, a national program which integrates virtual reality technology with game elements, recreates hazardous situations to mitigate industrial risks. But excessive use of technology has also been shown to be counterproductive. Anyone with a phone next to them knows its distracting impact. We found that almost 1/4 of countries have banned smartphones in schools through either law or policy. And the world is moving away from one-to-one technology programs. The share of countries implementing them has fallen from 30% to 15%. Finally, let's not forget, technology does not need to be advanced to be effective. China broadcast recorded lectures from good teachers to 100 million students in rural primary and lower secondary schools in the early 2000s. And evaluations 10 years later showed that this simple approach had increased student learning and had even reduced the urban-rural earnings gap. Sometimes technology can improve efficiency in education management. In Senegal, a distant coaching program was not as effective as a face-to-face program, but it was 83% more cost-effective. Technology can increase teacher professional development opportunities, but it is not easy to fulfill the potential of all these opportunities. Computer-based and computer-adaptive tests can improve student assessment, but there is no transparent data on the cost of these technologies yet. Learning data analytics can improve feedback, but the capacity of education managers to analyze such data remains very limited. Data sets are not integrated, and violation of data privacy is a growing concern. Technology helps content creation and adaptation, access and distribution, and can drastically reduce costs, for instance, in textbook production. But in practice, online content has grown without enough regulation. It is mainly produced in Europe and Northern America. 92% of OER Commons content is in English. This affects the relevance of the content. Platforms, which are increasingly being used by universities, are also greatly challenging their role. Technology is often bought with no clear view of the full costs. In the United States, only 11% of school administrators and teachers requested peer-reviewed evidence before they adopted a technology. Money is not always well spent. Around 2/3 of education software licenses were unused in the United States. The GEM report also estimated what it would take to implement two relatively simple, modest scenarios of digital transformation in the world's poorest countries. A simple offline scenario in low-income countries and a school connectivity scenario in lower middle-income countries. But even that would add 50% to the 100 billion annual financing gap these countries are already facing to achieve their national SDG 4 targets. The GEM report has also collected information on laws and policies on technology in education from more than 200 education systems, which feature in our peer website. For instance, the report finds that 16% of countries guarantee data privacy in education, while 19% regulate the use of personal devices in schools. In order to develop the report's recommendations, we considered 4 trade-offs, as you heard from the UNESCO's Director General. The call for personalization and adaptation clashes with the need to maintain the social dimension of education, where students come together to learn from each other. Just as technology offers means to include disadvantaged learners, it also ends up excluding many more, with new forms of digital divides emerging. Commercial interests tend to clash with usual conceptions of the common good. In practice, the language of business is used much more in decisions than the language of education. And short-term gains may underestimate long-term costs. It is time to reckon with education technology's costs in terms of environmental sustainability. The report's basic premise is that technology should serve people, and that technology in education should put learners' and teachers' best interests at the center. Technology's suitability and value need to be proven in relation to a human-centered vision of education. Decision makers need a compass when deciding to deploy technology in education. The first question is whether the use of education technology is appropriate for its context, aligned with learning objectives. Governments need to identify which digital technologies have been shown to improve learning and how, in order to then reform curricula and pedagogy accordingly. Not everything that shines is gold. An artificial intelligence-based system used by 25 million students in the United States did no better than traditional teaching. It is important to design, monitor, and evaluate policies on technology in education with the participation of teachers and students. In the United States, only 41% of senior leaders were consulted in such decisions. And solutions should be designed to fit the context. The 2018 TALIS survey found that only 43% of lower secondary school teachers felt prepared to use technology for teaching even after they had been trained. The second question is whether this use of education technology is equitable. A greater focus is needed on technology that supports the marginalized. National targets need to be set on meaningful school internet connectivity by 2025 and 2030 as part of the SDG 4 benchmarking process. The GEM report and the UNESCO Institute for Statistics published the first annual SDG 4 scorecard, which describes how quickly every country moves towards their national targets in 7 SDG 4 indicators. School connectivity has been added as the 8th such benchmark indicator after the Transforming Education Summit, and countries have been asked by UNESCO to submit their targets for that by the beginning of September. Governments also need to promote digital public goods in education, and UNESCO and UNICEF are working through the Gateways project to build international consensus about norms and quality standards for such platforms. The third question is whether this use of technology is scalable. Every country should have a body that evaluates education technology, and yet hardly any does. The United States has a federal-level clearinghouse, but only 2% of more than 10,000 registered products had strong or moderate evidence of effectiveness. Governments need to be wary of the total cost of ownership and implementation. It has been estimated that the initial investment in education technology accounts for only 25% of the eventual total cost. And we need to ensure transparency in public spending and in terms of agreements with private companies. Decentralization of decisions to school levels has often proven difficult for them. Finally, does this use of technology support sustainable education futures? Countries need to establish a curriculum and assessment framework for digital competencies that is broad, intended for citizenship, not just for the world of work, and not attached to specific technologies. A framework that takes account of what is learned outside school as well. Sometimes we don't need to look far. Analysis of PISA data suggests that students with the weakest reading skills were 5 times more likely to be misled by phishing emails compared to students with strong reading skills. We need to protect learners' and teachers' human rights, their well-being, safety, and privacy. One review of applications during the pandemic found that 89% of products were in fact collecting children's data. Finally, we need to consider the material and energy implications of digital technology in education. Extending the lifespan of all laptops in the European Union by a year would be equivalent to almost 1 million cars taken off the road, for instance. We need to keep learners' best interests at the center of a framework based on human rights and focused on learning outcomes, not digital inputs. Digital technology should not be a substitute for, but a complement to human interaction. This is also the focus of the Tech on Our Terms campaign that we're launching today, which calls for decisions about technology in education to prioritize learner needs, after assessing whether its application would be appropriate, equitable, scalable, and sustainable. It is necessary to learn to live both with and without digital technology, to take what is needed from an abundance of information, but ignore what is not necessary. We will now project a short animation that summarizes the messages of the report, and I would like to thank you very much for your attention.
La tecnología abre una ventana a un sinfín de conocimientos.
Technology opens a door to new knowledge, and for many people, this is the only way to have access to education. As we learned during the pandemic, this enables obtaining new ideas, enable proving and sharing and interacting with other people. However, we still need to take the most of our technology. Many have not access to technology. They cannot use it, or they cannot teach using it. Technology is not always apt or suitable for learning. It could actually be an obstacle instead of a tool for support. Connections can break barriers, but nothing replaces human interaction. We learn better from one another when we want to use the suitable technology. We lack evidence on the right benefits that it would provide. So we need to make sure that we are able to trust in the content. Ambitious programs sometimes don't take into consideration who fund them, and this has consequences and impacts for humanity and the planet. So the GEM report 2023 invites us to reflect on who defines the use of technology for education. Is it suitable and meeting our needs? Is it leaving anyone behind? Are we following up on the investments that are correct and the ones that fail? Are we walking on a sustainable path? Our decisions must always be centered on students, because technology is not always synonym of progress. Students must take from technology only what they need in a way that they can use it in a critical and safe way, and have tools to learn with and without it. So the use of technology is only in our terms.
Thank you very much, Manos, for your presentation and for this interesting video that summarizes 4 of the recommendations of the report, which provide a roadmap for public policy makers in order to guide the use of technology in education. The report suggests, metaphorically, that we should look below in order to determine if technology is adequate for our context and if the needs of learning are being taken into account. Behind, also looking back to see those who are left behind and make sure that we are focusing on the people who are at risk of exclusion. At the same time, proposes looking upwards in order to see if our choices are scalable, if we have evidence, and if we have calculated correctly the costs in order to make informed decisions. Finally, the report invites us to look forward in order to make sure that our plans are adjusted to our vision of sustainable development in the future. To reflect in more depth about how to carry out these recommendations, we're going to begin with a high-level panel. We're going to invite Maria Brown, the Ministry of Education of Ecuador, Camila Soreira Zampana, Minister of Education of Brazil, Jaime Saavedra, Director of Human Development for Latin America and the Caribbean of the World Bank, Berna Lalvejari, Executive Director of ETech Hub, Leandro Folgar, President of Ceibal of Uruguay, and Manos Antoninis, Director of the GEM report of UNESCO. We will also be accompanied virtually with video messages by Doreen Bogdan-Martin, Secretary of the General International Union of Telecommunications, Dave Senk, Minister of Sierra Leone, also Cristina Calas from Estonia, Gary Connell, the Latin American and the Caribbean Director for UNICEF. Thank you very much for being with us. So we're going to organize this panel based on 2 questions. The first question that is going to guide the first 4 interventions is: how can the education systems make sure that technology is adequate for different contexts and needs of learning, and guarantee that we are focusing on the people who are at risk of exclusion? We will begin with the answer through a pre-recorded video of Doreen Bogdan-Martin, General Secretary.
Digital is transforming education. As technologies like artificial intelligence make their way into classrooms, we all have a responsibility to ensure these technologies are safe and responsible and that no one is left behind. But what does it mean to be well educated in a world shaped by AI? Are stakeholders focusing on the most marginalized students and educators? And how is digital adding measurable value to specific learning needs and contexts? These are some of the crucial questions raised in the 2023 Global Education Monitoring Report. Part of the answer lies in partnership. That's why ITU wholeheartedly supports UNESCO in calling for a collaborative, inclusive approach to leveraging digital tools for learning. At last year's Transforming Education Summit, ITU joined UNESCO and UNICEF in a call to action on digital learning for all, calling for a whole-of-government approach to achieve SDG 4, recognizing digital as a key enabler to boost education quality and access. ITU has been committed to enhancing education through technology for decades, from advancing broadcasting and satellite connectivity for remote learning to connecting every school on Earth to the Internet. The ITU and UNICEF GIGA initiative, which has connected over 5,700 schools and 2 million children since 2019, shows how partnerships can help overcome some of the economic, inclusion, and efficiency challenges that have been highlighted in this year's GEM report. Meaningful connectivity is the key. Turning it to action requires comprehensive data, like our results from mapping schools, a laser focus on marginalized educators and learners, as well as guiding frameworks, such as those provided by ITU accessibility standards and digital skills programs like Equals. As we launch this year's GEM report, I urge all governments to set school connectivity targets through GIGA and to invest in inclusive connectivity and skills initiatives by joining Partner to Connect Digital Coalition. Together, we can bring safe and affordable online experiences to teachers and learners everywhere. Let's empower this generation and future generations with the connectivity and capacity that they need to thrive in our ever-changing digital world.
Good. So after this interesting video, we're going to invite the Ministry of Education of Ecuador, Maria Brown, to share her reflections. Thank you very much. First of all, I would like to say hello to everyone who is sharing this space with us. I would like to begin this reflection taking something that has already been said in the presentation, which is that after COVID, we had also been witnesses of the fact that if there was a suspicion that in-person education in contact with human to human could be replaced, and that does no longer exist. We are all certain that that essential contact in that human relationship is not something that we can substitute, and that the incorporation of technology in education is a tool that can be used in a good way or a bad way. And in this context, I just have some reflections about how to make this access to technology be inclusive for everyone, for all the students, and for us to be able to incorporate it in a useful way. First, talking about access, when we talk about handling devices and connectivity, making an emphasis in those sectors where traditionally this access is limited. And this makes us think about the context of the responses, especially in unequal regions such as ours, how we can reach rural or faraway sectors with the same capacity of connection, and not just with the access to a device, but also with the connection of the internet with a broadband speed that is good enough for queries on the internet to be able to be done, to be able to use the tools that are available. So this makes us think about how to expand the connectivity in a more democratic way that allows us to reach those who are most vulnerable with more priority. The second thing is how we can equip education institutions and what is the appropriate one. Is it a laptop? Are we straying further away from the idea of a device per student? But what are the resources that should be incorporated in the education institutions for the use of that technology to really be at the service of education, and what is the limit? And I think that today the debate of Denmark about in societies with high access to connections and devices in a very universal and democratic way, where is the limit and up to what point do we want to recover that use of more traditional resources such as books, pencils in a process of learning and complement these in an ideal way? Another thing is training. Think about what is the training that our teachers have in order to incorporate technology in the classrooms to be the ones who enable use of technology for our students. And this from a perspective that is in constant change and constant movement, because the resources are also being constantly updated and modernized. And in the limits of technology and approaching that, not leaving aside a debate that is very important on digital citizenship, talking about what are the risks of the use of technology, such as, for example, cyberbullying, phishing, sexting, and other challenges that are also a reality. How we can do this in a more integral way so that these are reflected in public policy, and especially for those who are most vulnerable. In Ecuador, we have tried to summarize the work plan in a digital one and a digital agenda for that goes up to 2025, and it's part of a national digital agenda that involves all of the institutions of the government and the state, which allows us to have a clear direction. And we have set an objective, which is to design plans, policies, and education programs that are focused on digital learning, digital alphabetization, and digital citizenship. So these three elements are complementary, but always thought as in how they insert in the interaction of human beings in the citizenship and the exercise of their rights in a collective way, and from the perspective of society and community and the development of the individual in a specific context. And so there we set a series of action, inclusive perspective that looks specifically to those populations that have been traditionally excluded, and try to see how to incorporate this technology in order to close gaps and try to advance in incorporating these tools, but especially reducing the access gap to these resources for those who are in situations of more disadvantage. Thank you very much, Minister. We now invite Camilo Soreira Santana, Ministry of Education of Brazil, to continue with the reflections. Good morning, everyone. I would like to thank the invitation of UNESCO. I would like to congratulate you on the presentation of the report. I would like to say hi to the whole of the roundtable, the Minister Pablo from Uruguay, our host, the foundation. Tell you that we are really taking priority as education as a priority in Brazil since the election of Lula, a president who, in his two first governments, invested a lot in education. They have a very important strategy, and it's really fundamental. The report provides a very important subject for discussion. There are some important things to know about Brazil. Brazil is a very large country. There's 40 million students in basic education, in primary education, more than 130,000 public schools just at that basic level. And so that is a huge challenge. And there's also a lot of inequality regionally. There's a lot of of countries in one country in a way with different cultural issues and economical issues. And one of the fundamental points is to guarantee alphabetization of our children at the right age. That is a program that was launched by the president, which gathers the impact of the 27 states of the federation in more than 5 Brazilian municipalities. And after the broadening integral schools, this is something that we really want to move forward in these full-time schools and integrate it in primary and secondary education. This is the topic of this encounter. The president is going to launch in a few days a program to connect everyone, 138,000 schools with broadband connection with pedagogical objectives. And this is a great challenge of accessibility, quality, and access to technology in the area of education. This is a first point where the Brazilian government has focused its attention, because there's huge differences in Brazil. There's the southern region, that one is a richer region. 80% of the schools have connection. But if we go to the Amazon, the northern region, less than 40% have access to connection, and they have low quality. And so that is the challenge, to guarantee a good quality connection. And then think about training. We have to train our teachers for a new model of education and connectivity. President Lula recently passed a law approved by Congress, and regarding policies of education in Brazil, there are several axes that have to do with research, and we are trying to work on those axes and build from there, and try to complement that with national laws that can also regulate the use of those digital platforms. We are seeing around the world bad experiences with technology, with disseminations that are anti-democratic, problems with violence, issues with schools. It has happened in Brazil, so that's why there's been a lot of worrying recently about control of digital platforms in our country.
We also have a key topic on which we're working that has to do with having a mandatory discipline, or at least, if we are not able to have that, something that we can have in the curriculum in order to include digital citizenship. Not only at school, you have to develop this ability. The access of technological media could be something positive, and this is the road, the path we want to establish. It is also important to build digital citizenship within basic education institutions in early childhood. And this is something that, of course, we need to put in practice as soon as possible. But it's important for us to have technology so we can grant this access. It must have pedagogical purposes. We must be able to control this. Well, and this is a huge challenge worldwide on how technology is becoming first more accessible and also cheaper. So developing and poor countries are getting more access. As we know, technology changes overnight, and we need to sort of run after these changes, and we need to change everything sometimes, improve our technological infrastructure. So with my initial words and with this brief thoughts that I'm sharing with you, I would like to highlight the importance for our Latin American countries to work jointly, to work hand in hand so we can increase the quality of public education for our children and youth, especially in Brazil. Connectivity is fundamental in this process, and it must be provided in an equitable and democratic way, not only for our population, but for all citizens. My congratulations to UNESCO. Thank you for inviting me today.
Muchas gracias, ministro, por su participación. Vamos ahora a un mensaje en video de David Sene, ministro principal de
We will now share.
Context and equity should be at the core of all our reflections on the use of technology in education. As the 2023 GEM report correctly mentions, it is essential to look down at where we are, to see if technology is appropriate for our context and learning needs, but also to look back at those left behind, to make sure we are focusing on the marginalized. Technology for technology's sake that neglects those two key points in mind is unlikely to produce the results we need to bring us closer to SDG 4. Understanding when and how to use and not use technology to serve our educational objectives is becoming a critical skill for 21st century education leaders. It means that the emphasis on examining technology through the lenses of relevance, equity, scalability, and sustainability is a critical point I hope we can all take from today. Too often, we talk about technology and how we can incorporate it without considering our needs and what will best address our problems. We look at the digital inputs, not the learning outcomes, as the GEM report urges us to do. In Sierra Leone, we have tried to look down and back. We've put equity at the center of our digital education policies, while at the same time use technology to improve the effectiveness and efficiency of our education system management in a way that can help us track learning. The radical inclusion policy approved under my ministry focused on providing equitable access to education for all children in Sierra Leone. It provides a roadmap for the day-to-day operation of schools to ensure inclusion and positive experiences for all students, regardless of the agenda and status in society. We know the importance of basing policies on evidence, and we're trying this roadmap to really having data being generated in our education system on learners' trajectories. Our emphasis on looking down and back has trickled down to teachers, school directors, parents, and communities. Our leaders in primary schools are now prepared to use tablets to collect and apply dynamic data to manage their classrooms, their schools, to oversee teacher registration, student enrollment, and attendance. They are partners in using technology to make sure that no one is left behind in a way that is fitting for their context and that aligns with our national policy to drive faster progress. In other words, in our carefully considered choice of what technology to invest in, we have chosen what we call #tech on our terms. Building systems based on unique students and school identifiers, as we have done since 2018, helps unequivocally. For example, our digitized annual school census can flag up an issue far faster than many physical inspection could do, albeit we need both. Looking back and down for radical inclusion, we have also invested in geospatial data. Their use remains nascent in poorer countries, even though it is needed there the most. In Sierra Leone, we're looking at ways of maximizing these innovations with a GIS tool that considers new school locations based on poverty, population, and flood risk data. It identifies where we have blind spots, where we could improve, and where we could learn. I'm excited by the potential of technology for the reason that it is an amplifier where correctly applied. I'm truly motivated to hear the experiences of my colleagues, peers, and friends over the next couple of days at this event, as we dissect and absorb the messages of the GEM report, for which I'm proud to be chair of its advisory board. I thank you.
Muy bien, agradecemos la participación de David Senec y seguimos reflexionando en torno a la primera pregunta. La recordamos. ¿Cómo pueden los sistemas educativos
Thank you very much. And so we're going to remember the first question, see how the different contexts and needs of learning can be approached, and guarantee that we are focusing on the people who are at risk of exclusion. We're now going to continue with a recorded message, in this case of Cristina Calas, Minister of Education and Research.
Your Excellencies, ladies and gentlemen, it is an honor and pleasure to take the floor to mark the launch of the 2023 Global Education Monitoring Report on Technology in Education. I am humbled by the recognition given to Estonia and will use this opportunity to briefly share some key observations from this journey. I do stress the word journey. Where we are today is a result of work of several decades ever since the restoration of our nation's independence. We are truly proud of our educational achievements in PISA rankings as well as in terms of our students' and teachers' high digital competencies. Indeed, before infrastructure, our attention must be centered on human beings, focusing on the skills and competencies of teachers and students. Specific attention to the development of students' digital competencies has been a priority since 2011. When digital competence was first included in the national curricula as one of the general competencies that must be acquired by graduating. This way, we can help learners familiarize with digital tools available in the learning process, but we also keep in mind the broader impact. In a fully digitalized world, digital competencies are crucial for self-fulfillment, contributing to career goals, learning, leisure, and most importantly, to social inclusion. Now, to come back to infrastructure, or more specifically, access to digital tools in the classroom. With our whole school network being covered with stable access to internet as a first step taken several decades ago, today, many tools are an inseparable part of the average school day. E-diaries for sharing homework and feedback between the school and the home, textbooks and learning resources moving online, or online admission systems. For many, this is how school has always been. The speedy and smooth transition to distance learning during COVID-19 showed us that we are on the right path, but also highlighted the bottlenecks we have quickly been able to draw our attention to ensure continuous access to quality education for all. These developments are not the result of governmental initiatives alone, and has been possible thanks to broad cooperation between diverse actors. We attach great importance to academia and EdTech sector, and we have full trust in our schools' judgment what is best for them. Several key tools covering all our school network are in fact offered by private providers, chosen autonomously by the schools themselves. Finally, a message to frame these past thoughts. Digitalization is never a goal on its own. There is no use for technology just for the sake of digitalizing education. Every decision to move from traditional to digital tools must be meaningful. It should simplify and support the learning process. As we keep in mind the importance of access to quality education for all learners, regardless of their background, these tools must always enrich and diversify learning opportunities and improve access to it, never the opposite. Thank you for your attention. Thank you.
We would like to thank the contribution of the Ministry of Education and Research of Estonia. And to finish with the reflections of the first question, we're going to see another pre-recorded message of José Mauricio Pineda, Minister of Education, Science and Technology of El Salvador. Good morning. It's a pleasure to participate in this. It's a pity that I couldn't be there in person, but due to very important reasons that I couldn't prevent, I had to cancel my trip last moment, but I wanted to participate in this huge event that for us as El Salvador is extremely important. With an education that is important focus in pedagogical innovation rather than first in digital innovation. And this can only be achieved in a good education ecosystem. We have the mission of guaranteeing that children and teenagers can fully have the rights to learn and to have teachers who can take advantage of technopedagogy and who can go ahead and promote and make easy the learning of knowledge and competences that can help the person be an integral person and develop as a citizen. But this also involves the family, society, and it places at the center the person who is learning, the student. We are living in an era of a lot of technology, communication, education, but we have to remember that technology is the medium and not the end, and it's a tool for the pedagogical act. Only in those conditions will technology be adequate, a tool to guarantee quality education. During decades, Ecuador was submerged in a moment, in a valley period for education, health, and other things. But the government, since the beginning, has intentionally and systematically, since the beginning, tried to use technology extensively in all the areas, and particularly in the digital transformation of education. This has implied for all the population to appropriate this and strengthen their digital abilities. And with digital disruption, we have lived a process of alphabetization, digital alphabetization, and not just with the introduction of technology, but also taken advantage of these socially and politically. With the 2019 COVID pandemic, there was even more difficulty in access for children and young people who, as a consequence of a lack of digital resources and the restrictions of staying at home, lived their schooling with a lot of challenges in their continual education. But this phenomenon that affected our population so severely became an opportunity to make the digital transformation of education in Salvador a reality, and has also shown the interest of educators and students in wanting a change of how to live their education processes. And so the government took advantage of this and invested in education, and it increased the budget from 3.2 to 5.2 regarding the GDP for education. The majority of the budget increase was invested in training teachers, having digital platforms, technological equipment, and connections to provide opportunities for everyone. We have to be convinced that we have to invest more and better in order to move forward towards our objectives and meet the commitments that we have with the people. As part of the education reform that the country is going through, called My New School, the government undertakes the commitment of having all children and teenagers in public education centers to have access to science and technology, and for there to be no inequalities independently of where they live or study. We cannot implement in an isolated way the process of technologies in the education system. We have to do this in an articulated way, synergically with other processes, and in transformations that also encompass other areas of life. From this perspective, our teenagers and children who in the past didn't have access to technology can now have their own devices in their school and at home, and this means working for equality and social justice, providing specialized equipment as well as without distinction to our population who have disabilities is also an obligation of public policy with a focus on quality education that implies a participation of everyone and especially the younger people. Digitalization of education does not have to follow steps that are different from other education policies. In Salvador, we are convinced that our education policies have to start with education as a right. And this is not just with quality education. The education system, the school, is a space that guarantees or provides the possibility of other rights. A education policy that is understood in this way can only be oriented towards universality and inclusion, and therefore is really equitable and can only answer to particular aspects if it is based on evidence. Technology is not everything. We have to understand our students, the people in their immediate context, and being part of a family and a community. Nothing can affect the interest of a child as having a good teacher, a family, and a community that is stimulating them and that is helping them learn and grow. That's why schools have to be connected with the community and to understand the territory where it is as also a space of learning, opportunities to have opportunities to live and also transcend. The digital transformation and the transformation of the world is happening, and people are also transformative. The school is a space where we learn tools to change and to use this for the benefit of all. However, this is not learned in any environment, and along these lines, we think that we have to transform the pedagogical model and that technology should be incorporated to the model and not the other way around. A pedagogical model that provides opportunities for all and where technology can be appropriated with a focus on equity and rights.
Muy bien, agradecemos la participación del Ministerio de Educación, Ciencia y Tecnología del Salvador para cerrar las respuestas de esta primera pregunta.
Okay, thank you very much for your kind words centered on inclusion. We will now go to the second question, that is, how can we look towards the future and take decisions based on evidence which are scalable and sustainable in the future? We would like to invite this to Jaime Saavedra, Director of Human Development for Latin America from the World Bank.
Muchas gracias, Florencia, por la pregunta. Quería, en primer lugar, felicitar a UNESCO.
First of all, I would like to congratulate UNESCO and Plan Ceibal and the Ministry of Education and Culture for this event and for inviting us to have this important debate. I would like to also congratulate Manos and the GMR team for an excellent report, an excellent presentation, and for making emphasis in this report. The discussion here is on learning. This is the key discussion, and how technology can be functional towards this end. And speaking about learning, I would like to congratulate Uruguay for signing and adhering to the commitment on taking action on basic learnings. This was signed by a group of Latin American ministries, and in particular by Uruguay. So congratulations, you have committed yourselves to include this as a state policy and make progress in this sense. In order to answer this question for evaluation and sustainability and also scalability, this is a very broad question, right? First of all, I would like to emphasize something already mentioned in the report, that is the importance of constantly evaluating the quality of the different solutions we provide or the ones that start to be presented in this dynamic environment. We must think that it is not enough to evaluate the impact, but the process itself, the process of implementation on any technological solution must be taken into consideration. Use this information that is constantly coming from the use of certain technological tools. When we have an adaptive software program, there is a huge amount of information every time that kid is clicking something, whether they make a mistake or not. There is a huge amount of information on the learning process that sometimes is not taken care of. We don't take advantage of it. and there is sort of a divorce, a separation on the different technological stakeholders. There is not enough interrelationship in the process of learning technology or among technology and private companies producing and manufacturing technologies, and even researchers on technological tools. So this kind of divorce and separation must be overcome. I also wanted to mention on scalability and sustainability. First of all, we are facing a huge learning crisis in Latin America and also in Uruguay. We need to make progress in a much faster way. It is not enough for kids to be at school. They must learn. So facing this learning crisis, is technology helping us to move forward and overcome this obstacle? First of all, we have been constantly evaluating, and we are aware of available technologies that are available in the market. Okay, once we know that, what is the first challenge? And I'm not talking about Uruguay, okay? Because Uruguay has made a huge progress throughout the Ceibal plan over the last 15 years. Just to talk about the average in Latin America, in general speaking, there is a huge problem on information flow, because many times those providing information are vendors, and for the government it is very difficult to take the right decision, especially in a market that is extremely imperfect in terms of lack of symmetry, because who knows what works where and how. Purchases are so complex. As we know, the procurement processes for software are so complex for governments. In the case of Uruguay, for example, this was solved in a very creative way by Ceibal as being an entity that is public, but they belong to private right, and they are able to contract and procure in a very different way compared to other states in Latin America. So this is the first reflection, how you can purchase and acquire scalable technology. As the Estonian Ministry of Education said, this is also resolved in a very decentralized way. Each school must have a lot of learn by their directors in order to decide what technological solutions they wish to buy. And in many countries, we don't have that capability at all. So adding to this problem, let's suppose, okay, we're able to identify the solutions, we're able to procure them, but now what do we do with the connectivity issue? I think that in the medium term, this will be a restriction that we will be facing less and less because prices are dropping. So I think that over the next decade, we're going to be solving this. Kids are going to be connecting, schools are going to be connected. We will have a laptop available at each school for each kid, but the problem is that we need to have an ecosystem for management, for the logistics, the maintenance of all this hardware that is very complex as well. So we have here another challenge. And the third huge challenge, okay, we have the software, we were able to buy it, we evaluate the policies, we solve the hardware and the maintenance, but now, is this going to then, if we strike the right balance between technology and the human right, is this going to be helpful for us to learn? If we don't strike that balance, no one's going to learn. So we must evaluate technology and the impact it has on learning. And teachers must see technology in a way that it is a tool, another tool that they can use. So we say that, is technology going to be replacing the teacher? No. We're not going to be replacing anyone, but it could happen that those professors or teachers who don't know how to use the technology in a correct way eventually will be replaced by another teacher that knows or has the software skills or is more tech-friendly. This is going to happen, let's face it. There's no other way. Technology will be used. We must make sure that teachers have the capability on doing the right things. And I also wanted to comment about the opportunity. It is so important to provide opportunities to everyone. Technology is the great leverage, but nowadays it is an inequality problem because no one Not everybody has access to a device right now. But the most important thing is that not everyone has access to a teacher who has the skills to use technology. Is AI going to replace teachers? No. But if the teacher is able of using AI, then he or she will be able to provide information in a much easier way, in a much faster way, consuming less time. He or she will be able to have more entertaining exercises for the students. And then they will have time to dedicate what is difficult to be replaced with technology, which is to foster critical thinking, creativity. These are the things that will not be replaced. This good professor or teacher will have then more time to invest in these areas. So I think this is the key challenge. So it is important for us to use this potential, the potential of technology. And I think that technology can be the best equalizer we can have in accelerating the learning processes. But this means that we need to invest in technology. And we also need to invest in the proper teachers. We need to make sure that we have a right selection process. So we really hire those that are committed the most with these challenges. And they have a huge responsibility. It is not only teaching. It is the responsibility of making sure that every kid learns. And also, we need to provide these teachers with a technical support so they can acquire these technological skills. Thank you so much for your time. Thank you, Jaime. We would like to now share an answer from Gary Conneal. He's the UNICEF Regional Director for Latin.
Esteemed Ministers of Education, distinguished colleagues from UNESCO, and members of the Global Education Monitoring Team, my name is Gary Conneal, and I am Regional Director for Latin America and the Caribbean for UNICEF. It's indeed a pleasure to greet you all this morning as we gather for this significant event. We are here today because we all agree that education is a fundamental right for every child and every adolescent. However, in Latin America and the Caribbean, millions of children are being deprived of the education they need to thrive. The closure of schools during the pandemic have had devastating impact, with up to 4 out of 5 10-year-olds unable to read a simple text. Moreover, thousands of children across the region are not attending school at all. In this region, we are all well aware that those who are being left behind in terms of education are primarily living in impoverished communities. They include indigenous and Afro-descendant children, those with disabilities, girls who are being denied access to classrooms, and children whose life has been upended by various crises such as climate disaster and migration. Digital solutions can play a vital role in keeping these marginalized children engaged in learning and propelling them towards a brighter future. However, we face a significant challenge in a region where 1 in 3 people lack access to the internet. Nevertheless, UNICEF, together with our partners, is diligently working to connect children and adolescents with world-class digital solutions that are based on solid evidence. We prioritize listening to the voice of children and adolescents, involving them in decision-making processes, and creating solutions that cater to their specific needs. Additionally, we collaborate with various stakeholders to leverage data, ensuring that our programs have a profound impact on the lives of these young individuals. Allow me to highlight the extremely important initiative, the UNICEF and Microsoft Learning Passport platform. This digital learning program has provided high-quality educational content to children in 5 countries across the region during the pandemic. In Mexico, the platform has already shown success in improving learning outcomes for secondary school adolescents. This year, Mexico will become the first country in the region to pilot the platform's outline version enabling us to reach disconnected students and provide them with high-quality education. We are also collaborating with partners such as UNESCO, EdTech Hub, and other key actors in the global digital education ecosystem. Together, we aim to harness the potential of technology and utilize valuable information to bridge the learning gaps and overcome the digital divide in our region. Latin America and the Caribbean possesses immense potential to become leaders in innovative education. Some countries like Uruguay are already paving the way with their progressive approaches. However, we still require more data and evidence, such as the recently released Global Education Monitoring Report, to guide us in providing vulnerable children with digital solutions that best suit their needs. Today, with all of you gathered here in Montevideo, we have the opportunity to work alongside our partners and make significant strides. Together, we can bridge the digital divide, connect every school to the internet, and bring accessible technologies to the fingertips of children, whether they are at home, in school, or on the move throughout the region. As Regional Director for UNICEF, I would like to commend the remarkable efforts of UNESCO colleagues and the Global Education Monitoring team. Let us ensure that this space serves not only as a platform for reflection on education and technology, but also as a catalyst for strong commitment and action. We must work tirelessly to guarantee quality learning for every child, as their future and the future of this entire region depends on it. Thank you for all your dedication and collaboration, and I hope you make the most of this event.
Thank you very much for the contribution of the Regional Director of UNICEF. We want to remind you about the question that we are reflecting about in this segment. How can we look forward and make decisions based on evidence that are scalable and sustainable in the future? We now invite to contribute to the debate Berna Lekhari, who is the director of Berna Lekhari, who is the director of EdTech Hub.
Huge thank you to UNESCO and the GEM team for inviting me to the stage today to launch the seminal report for our sector. It is indeed a seminal report for our sector and one that is much needed. I also want to extend appreciation to the Minister of Uruguay for the warm welcome and Ceibal Foundation for hosting this important conversation and this global platform for this report. This is actually my first time in Uruguay, and really feel the warm welcome that you've all extended. We've had quite a few comments today on the panel, so I'm going to keep mine fairly brief. And want to say that as a research consortium that is focused on building the evidence base for technology and education, we're actually preoccupied with sustainable, scalable solutions and making sure that the sector has what they need in order to make good, wise, sound decisions about technology in education. The discussion in the global education space is often still dominated by what I think of as non-specific pessimism or uncritical optimism. And this report actually goes a long way in providing some really rigorous data to address some of these tensions in the sector. One of the major challenges that we face, and one that was actually highlighted in the report, is that good, impartial evidence is actually in short supply. We don't have the data that we need in order to make wise decisions. The landscape as we know it is rapidly evolving. The spend in technology or the investments in edtech is just exponentially increasing. And that really leaves key decision makers, like many of you, in a space with facing to make tough decisions without the data, without the hard data. Jaime referenced the complexities of procurement and what goes into actually making sound decisions when it comes to technology and education. As a global education resource, the EdTech Hub is actually focused on building this evidence, and I'm very pleased to say that we currently have about 13 research studies underway that focus on low and middle income countries and looking at the efficacy of interventions when it comes to technology and its usage, and specifically the scale and the spend on EdTech. But I will also be the first one to say that that's not enough. The challenge of supply is a real one, and one that really requires a multi-pronged approach, one that requires the research community, the institutes of higher education, as well as government units to really strengthen the capacity for data-driven decision-making. And don't get me wrong, many ministries are actually doing this. We heard from the Minister of Education in Sierra Leone, Minister Asenge, where they have a nice, good focus on data-driven decision-making. But I'd like to push the envelope and say it's less about collecting the data, but it's more about strengthening the capacity to interpret the data, to analyze the data, and then to truly use the data and make the commitment to leveraging this data for the tough decisions that we need to make when it comes to technology and education. I will also say that the framework provided by the GEMS report at the tail end of it, the recommendations, really put forth a nice compass and a series of questions that we should always be considering when we're thinking about procurement decisions and the complexities that go into making these procurement decisions. I'll take it a step further, actually, and I'll put out a call or a challenge to the sector to really think about these questions, and I'll expand on them a little bit because I think they're really important in guiding our decisions when it comes to purchasing rigorous EdTech interventions. And this question, the questions that I'll put forth really are relevant regardless of where you sit and the role that you play, whether you're a decision maker at the Ministry of Education, whether you're a researcher, a donor, someone in the donor community, or a school leader, really to think about a few things, and I'll outline them very quickly, and they relate really closely to the compass in the report. The first question is, will this use of technology lead to sustained impact on student learning? As educators, we're in the business of teaching and learning, right? What kids know and need to be able to do is what should drive us. So this justification on spend really should be tied to the improvement in student learning. Next, will this use of technology work for the most marginalized children and enhance equity? One of the criticisms of EdTech is that it has the potential to exacerbate inequities. So how are we making sure that the EdTech solutions that we put forth are viable in low-resourced communities as well? And then tied to that, again, what is referenced in the report is total cost of ownership. Are the EdTech solutions that we're putting out there or that we're getting ready to procure cost-effective? And cost-effective for poor countries, for low and middle-income countries. Again, making sure that when we think of total cost of ownership, we're thinking not just about the procurement of devices, because that's just where it starts, but really also thinking about teacher professional development, human capacity, and the operations that go into launching EdTech interventions. And then, of course, contextualizing the interventions. Will this use of technology be effective in the specific context with a specific set of needs and unique environments? And lastly, of course, which I think is as important, is making sure that the EdTech interventions we put out actually align with government priorities. So instead of having EdTech strategies that sit on the side, how are we making sure that our EdTech plans or strategies are incorporated into broader education sector plans and the broader vision for education for a country? So, of course, this is a framework. And these are not questions that require simple yes or no answers, but really needing to unpack how we do this, why we do this, and to what extent we do this. But I challenge you all to actually think about the recommendations and the moral compass that was put forth in the report as you go forward and use evidence to inform your decision making. Thank you so much for your time today.
Bueno, muchas gracias, Berna, por tus aportes y tus desafíos para el sector. Vamos a terminar ahora esta pregunta vinculada con escalabilidad, sostenibilidad y futuro con la palabra de Leandro Folgar, presidente de Ceibal de Uruguay.
Bueno, buenos días. Muchas gracias, Florencia, por darme la palabra. Gracias a todos los panelistas que me antecedieron por la presentación. Muchísimas gracias. Como anfitrión quiero darle las gracias a todos los participantes que están aquí siguiéndonos, ministros que nos han honrado con su presencia y a todos los participantes que también nos están siguiendo por streaming. Aquí mismo tenemos otra sala en donde se está siguiendo el evento por streaming y además personas conectadas desde todas partes del mundo, lo que le da a Uruguay la honra y a su vez la responsabilidad de que se haya elegido este lugar para lanzar el reporte global sobre el estado de la educación con un énfasis en tecnología por el
GAM report and an emphasis on technology due to the work that Uruguay has been doing since 16 years ago in trying to integrate technology to education. When I was hearing about how complex the need for evidence is, the need to not take technology as a solution, a broad solution, and try to have a more balanced outlook. We've been trying to do this for 16 years in Uruguay, and we still don't have all the answers. We don't have the final answers or the final solution. This marks something that I'm always trying to highlight, which is the implementation, the inclusion of digital technologies in the education system is more similar to a marathon than to a 100-meter race. It is a task that we have to be prepared for permanently, and which we will always, the finish line is always going to be moving ahead. We always have to improve in that sense. We want to thank Jaime for his contribution. It helps me here in the Robert Silva, the president of ANEB, and all the other members. It helps us not be so angry when we have a public bid for software, and we have to study and try to see how a solution is included in the education system, because it's going to impact the students, it's going to impact the rest of the platforms that we have available. We're going to have an interoperation perspective and equality perspective, and so that is very important. I also wanted to reference what Maria Brown talked about in the beginning, this intellectual flirting that we've had with this thing of technology replaces education, the teacher. That comes from more of a human impulse. Well, in the 1900s, wanted to teach through telephone in New York, and then in the United States, television racks were created where there were VHS libraries, and there you had the best teachers of the country on tape, and with that they wanted to replace teachers in the time, and of course it was a huge failure at the time. And it's not just digital technologies that have this temptation of trying to replace this task of education. It comes from way back. And I think that we're not going to rid ourselves from that, because it's part of what the industry does to try to imagine possible futures. The thing is that the education system has to be prepared to understand what it needs in order to ask for it in the correct way and to try to build it in the correct manner. I was listening to this thing of the hashtag tech on our terms, and this is basically what Ceibal has been trying to do since 16 years ago. It's been trying to see how to build a technological infrastructure that can give us digital self-determination in the education communities that has a equity emphasis and the emphasis of getting to all the students around the country in any condition. And this also has to do with what Ceibal is trying to do in the future. Our mission is to try to learn from the future and try for the future to be distributed equitably around the education community. As Jaime was saying, technology is not the solution to education issues, but there should be digital technologies at the service of education in the future. And we have to build those capacity. We have to bring those talents and put them at the service of the deployment of technologies in the education centers and education communities that foster knowledge. To answer the question specifically, how we can have policies that are based on evidence and take a look at the future, one of the fundamental things is, what do we refer to when we talked about evidence-based policies? I think that this is a term that has acquired some fame recently. I think that public policies have, from my point of view, have always been based on evidence, but the thing is that right now, the type of evidence that we can use now to correct policies is different. It's much more agile. We can perfect the policies that we launch and we implement. Obviously, any policymaker is based on some sort of evidence to create that policy. The thing is that they have to know when they create that policy is starting to benefit some people, starting to complicate some other people, it's going to impact some communities in a certain way and others in another. And for that, you need to have agile structures that can permanently modify the structure of those policies. And so Ceibal has, during many years, advanced in like geological layers of innovation, where first we try to shorten the technology gap, trying to bring devices and then connectivity, and then we have the thing of teacher training, contents, and everything that appears in this report. And we always found different issues, and we always try to perfect them. And to give you a notion, in a country with 100% of the students who are connected, 100% of students have devices, and still, even with that being solved, there's still inequalities in the how people take advantage of those technologies. And we've had to have action on how to mitigate those inequalities, even though we have been celebrated around the world due to a response to the pandemic and how we were able to provide a response with technology. We found lots of opportunities for improvement. And I think that this report, and I want to help thank Manos for choosing Uruguay to present it, but also for the work that he's done. I think that this report provides a broad perspective of what this could mean for each country. The Minister of Education of Uruguay in the beginning was saying that we have to think globally and act locally. And I would just like to ask you to think that what you're reading in this report has insights, has information of countries that, for example, are using artificial intelligence for passing the attendance in class. And at the same time, there's the radio as a main device, maybe in another country. And along the lines of that deployment of technology, there's information about that in the report. And I think that's the perspective that we have to have. And that is a good way to look at the future when we think about evidence-based policies.
Thank you so much, Leandro. With Leandro's intervention, we would finish then this section. We have seen on the importance of moving forward with connectivity, things that also, of course, are worrying us, the importance of the interpretation of data and how to use data in an intelligent manner, and also something that Jaime mentioned, the way in which we procure technology and the bureaucracy of each country involved in or surrounding this process. This is like a true race, right? We need to prepare physically and mentally on this. So, Manu, it is now your turn to tell us how to solve this. I don't want to put any pressure on you, Manos, but Manos Antonini, director of the GEM report, director of UNESCO, is going to share with us the most important finding on this component.
First of all, I would like to thank sincerely all the panelists for engaging so generously with the report and its findings and showing to all of you the richness of the material that is there. I wish I had the killer fact to share on procurement. I can tell you we tried. It's a very difficult topic to research. I hope that will be in the next opportunity to publish such a report in the coming years. But for me, the fact that is the most appealing is of those that I presented is that very simple finding that those students who can read, have better skills reading, are those in much better position to navigate the digital world. What does this tell us? It just tells us that education systems need to ensure that all children finish secondary school at the very, very least and come out of this experience with at least the minimum levels of proficiency in the skills that we're expecting them to learn. With that, they're really forming the basis, the foundation for their societies, for their communities, for their countries, to then put on top of that a layer of technology like Uruguay has tried to do and catapult it to the next level. But let's not forget the obligations, the commitments we made in 2015 to achieve by 2030. All children should have these minimum competencies, and there are so many ways to achieve that. And first of all, of course, it requires the political commitment and the resources of that. Then we can think about how technology can be used to further strengthen us. Thank you.
Bueno, muchísimas gracias, Manos, muchísimas gracias a todos los panelistas por sus aportes que dan cuenta de lo complejo que es lograr configuraciones con soluciones.
Panel for sharing with us how complex this topic is and how we can adapt it and scale and provide more scalability to this. So working from this report, we will continue to reflect. Thank you so much. Thank you to all our participants. As Maria Florencia said, she will continue to moderate the next part, but we will give them some time to go back to their seats. Thank you so much for these top-level participants who started to introduce us in this report and also to the challenges that we are discussing. We will now continue with the second panel. This second part that Maria Florencia will continue to moderate, so I will give her some time to continue. Thank you. We are just about to close this, but just a reflection on technology and education to share these highlights on the 2023 GM report. It will be very useful to continue this reflection for those who are occupying decision-making positions, development agencies, and other stakeholders that are relevant and other institutions that play a part in the decision-making, without leaving behind, of course, the most important components and persons involved, like the students, the families, and the teachers themselves. We will share with you videos with different stakeholders united with the same objective. Think on how technology can help us in building a more inclusive, equitable, and higher quality.
Technology should be seen as a means to an end and not an end in itself. The needs of the learners, the needs of the teachers, the needs of the community must well be assessed before the deployment of technology. Bridging the digital divide offers us the greatest hope of bridging the learning gap.
As a country with the fourth largest education system in the world, the use of technology allows us to scale and accelerate this transformation, ensuring equal access to quality education, tools, and materials across the archipelago. We have a philosophy of user-centric design as we approach technology. And this has helped us in providing support for teachers and principals for them to actually move along the transformation. Indonesia is entering a new paradigm where technology plays a pivotal role in accelerating transformation in education. And I believe the publication of the 2023 Global Education Monitoring Report will further optimize the potential of technology in transforming our educational systems.
We must harness and master the digital revolution and artificial intelligence from a pedagogical perspective, integrating them through active and learner-centered teaching and learning methods and practices, so that they are understood not as the dreaded substitute for teachers, but rather as teachers' best ally in empowering them to guide their students' quest for inquisitive, critical, and creative learning. This is not about the technology. It's about the learning.
I would encourage all states to use the GEMS 4-point compass for policymakers to review and revise existing policies so as to ensure the best outcomes and safeguarding of rights.
In an age of artificial intelligence, it's more important than ever for every student in every school to learn the basics of computer science and artificial intelligence. It's also important that we teach technology, computer science, and artificial intelligence with safety and ethics in mind. And if we do this, the growing field of artificial intelligence has the promise of helping every student advance in their education and every student to have access to personalized learning to help advance in ways that are meaningful to their passions. I encourage every student in every school to learn computer science and AI, and I encourage education leaders to make computer science and artificial intelligence a basic part of school curriculum.
Africa should make use of digital education to empower its young population. However, in order to promote evidence-based digital education policies and intervention, we must overcome digital divide between the poor and rich and the urban and rural areas. To do that, we should abandon one-size-fits-all approach.
The recommendations in the GEM report are clear. The use of technology in education must stem from evidence-based choices. Equity and human rights must be at the centre, not corporate profit-making. For Education International and our 32 million teachers and education support personnel, EdTech on our terms means teachers are the prime decision makers in what technology is used and how. It means quality, continuous professional development. It means the adoption and implementation of legislation to protect the data and privacy rights and well-being of students and teachers. And it means governments must fully fund public education to meet these requirements.
I believe that this report is not only for decision makers, but for also us, the young people. Young people have been highlighting the role of technology and well-being in putting learners at the center.
Artificial intelligence has the potential to transform education with innovative methods for learning, teaching, administration, and assessment, going beyond SDG 4. The 2023 GMM report on technology education emphasizes the crucial importance of prioritizing learning needs and ensuring appropriate, equitable, evidence-based, and sustainable application of technology education.
Agradecemos los aportes de quienes participaron en este video e invitamos ahora a Stefania Giannini, subdirectora
We would
general
like to
de
thank you
Educación
all
de la UNESCO, a dar unas palabras
for
de cierre
your
para la
support.
presentación del informe GEM 2023
And we would like
sobre
to
la
invite
tecnología en la
now
educación
one of our
general.
colleagues who is going to be closing this.
Sono tecnologiche.
Buenos días, en primer excelencias, señor ministro, queridos amigos y amigas. En primer lugar,
Firstly, it's a great pleasure and a great honor to finally be here in Uruguay. It's the first time for me, a country that has been widely recognized for its focus, its approach, and being a pioneer in education technology thanks to the transformation policies of education that the Minister Paulo da Silveira has implemented, thanks to the Ceibal Foundation, that we know each other very well. And I want to thank the President of the Republic, Mr. Luis Lacalle Pou, and Minister of Education and Culture, Mr. Paulo da Silveira. Of course, our dear friends and colleagues of the Ceibal Foundation as well. Thank you for welcoming us in your home and having this conversation that is very important and very current.
Sorry for not being able to join since the beginning. We had a great day in Paris yesterday, as you may know, and I just landed in Montevideo half an hour ago. So, but of course, I follow all the discussion already done, also a little piece of the last panel. And I do believe that today's meeting does represent really a seminal moment, not only for the region, it's a global event, but more importantly for the global debate, which this report has already provoked. I'm sure some breaking news you heard this morning from some important media, among the others, The Guardian, taking the pitch of the report about UNESCO and all other partners' position on how, whether, how, and to what extent the technology should be part of the future of learning and education. And I think this is the basic question that, from different perspectives, ministers, policymakers, educators, teachers, I would say children, youth, and learners have to take into account in the coming months and years. And I'm sure that this dialogue aims to ensure that digital learning is a public good, a common public good, and a pillar for transformation, for transforming education. This was the main point that we all together, I'm sure you have clear mind about that, discussed in New York last year when we launched the movement on transforming education to the right direction, putting learners and teachers at the very core. And this is, Manos, I suppose, one of the main messages of the report as well. But let me say that today's event, in my opinion, does represent also a comprehensive dialogue, very timely dialogue, because this is a topic that it's not only complex, it's not only broad, almost obvious, but is very fast changing, more than we expected. The report is touching also the question of AI, which is a particular component of technology. But of course, while the report has been drafted and has been actually based on the collection of impressive global data, a particular generation of AI, what we call generative AI, is coming out disruptively. And this is something which demonstrated that a few months ago, I would say, the picture where the report has been embedded was a little bit different than today. So that's another important perspective that we have to keep in mind. The discussion, the dialogue we are building must go very fast in order to follow and to possibly anticipate risks and opportunity of technology. Well, I think that such gatherings, what we did in New York last year, the launch of the 2020 2023 GEM report on technology in education are nothing less than the future of learning in the digital age. And this dialogue is as effective as the breadth of the data and the robustness of the analysis that the report draws on. Let me say that the sudden reliance on distance learning during the COVID-19 pandemic, and more recently the explosion of generative artificial intelligence, has made all of us more aware of the need of quality information and recommendation to better inform our decision. And this is why I think this is one of the most crucial reports, Manos, that your team and UNESCO published in recent years, in my opinion. Let me reflect from the UNESCO perspective on some dimensions. They are so rich of different possible understanding, but I wish to focus on three points. The first point is that the report draws on data from over 200 education systems. So we never had before such a comprehensive global picture of where we are, the state of the art of technology in through education globally. And this is about providing us and providing you, honorable ministers, who have to take decisions for your children and your communities, with a guiding framework to ask the right questions and to offer evidence-based recommendation. The main message, you already mentioned, Manos, one main message, that children who can read and understand the basic can also drive and navigate better in technology. The main message, in my opinion, we can learn from this global evidence is that technology has already dramatically changed learning in profound, yet clearly unequal ways. So I think that out of the 4 recommendations that the report, the principle that the report actually uses as to set the recommendations, equity is still very much the most important, and inclusion is the other side of the coin. And this raises pressing questions, especially at this critical juncture in history when we only have a few years to reach the goal, to reach our common mission, SDG 4, in terms of quality education for all. As I warned, and my colleagues with me, ministers, when we gathered the discussion on generative AI a few weeks ago, many of you were kindly connected with us in Paris, we are now moving towards an unknown future without adequate and appropriate guidelines on technology use. And we need education-specific rules and regulations to allow us to come up with our own standards and frameworks for privacy, data access, digital equity, to name a few of them. And I think that this part of the report is another critical and very useful tool in your hands as policymakers to make transformation a real benefit for all learners and communities. I do believe also that the 4 principles that the GEM report puts at the center, sustainability, equity, scalability, and the context, should really wisely guide the lines for drafting new laws, why not, new regulation frameworks at national, at regional, at global level. But most importantly, I think that the title, as usual, the report has this kind of nice approach to use the title to provoke, but also to give a kind of hidden message. And the message is that we have to use technology, for sure, we cannot avoid. We have to use technology to transform. We have to put the learners at the center, but most importantly, we have to use technology on our own terms. And this is, I think, also the important part of the discussion which will take place from Uruguay for the region in Montevideo today. Thank you very much, and enjoy the rest of the conference. Thank you.
Muchas gracias, Estefania, por las palabras de cierre. Como remarcó la subdirectora general de Educación de la UNESCO, el foco está puesto en las definiciones del propio sector de educación sobre las configuraciones para abordar la integración de la tecnología en la educación, y también un foco muy importante que remarcó Estefania sobre la equidad, ¿no? Y por ende la relación con la inclusión. Con estas palabras damos por finalizado el primer bloque del lanzamiento del informe GEM 2023 sobre la tecnología en la educación. Agradecemos especialmente a los panelistas que nos han acompañado, a la audiencia que está aquí presencialmente y también a todos aquellos que siguen la transmisión en línea. Muchas gracias.
Gracias, Florencia, por toda esta mañana que estuviste navegando. Muchísimas gracias.
Good morning. You've been navigating. Thank you very much to all the participants and everyone who is here in person and those who are following the conference online. And before we go to a short break, I'm going to tell you a bit of what is going to come in the second part of the morning. After this break, we're going to talk in the second block about education and technology in the Global South, dialogues on the recommendations of the GEM report 2023. Of course, the dialogue is going to continue now during the break while you have some coffee. Remember that you can share things on Twitter with the hashtags that we've reminded you about. So the 2023 GEM report, tech on our terms. And we are also inviting you to what's going to be the annual encounter for the Alliance of Digitalization of Education in Latin America. It's going to begin at 3 o'clock in this same place, and it's going to approach the challenges and advantages of digital transformation in teacher training and trying to close gaps in education. There's going to be fundamental things that we're going to talk about in the afternoon. In the second block, I'm going to tell you a bit of what's coming in the afternoon, and we're going to wait for you. We're going to be back in 15 minutes to continue with the exchange of ideas. Thank you.